So let's go over some of the development considerations that you're going to have when you're developing an iPhone application. First foremost thing, the tools run on Mac OS X only. So you gotta go out and get a Mac if you want to do iPhone development. You can try some virtual machine things, but in reality, you're going to need a Mac. So that's just how it works. And maybe in the future we'll have some ability to develop on Windows machine. You might think, oh well, I'm going to use MonoTouch. No, MonoTouch only runs on Mac OS X also, so you pretty much need a Mac. I said before, it's targeting specific hardware devices. So whereas you're developing for Android or another mobile platform that may have different hardware devices, you got to think about all these different things like different resolutions and different components that may exist or may not exist. You know exactly what your targets are, and they're very few with iPhone development. So you can kind of make your code more streamlined and not have to consider all these exceptional situations. One of the really big things to understand here is we're entering a parallel universe when we're doing iPhone development. If you're from the .NET world like me, going to iPhone development is basically going to Mac development. And the development lines kind of branch. While us .NET developers and us Java developers, we're off in one direction doing our dependency injection and test-driven development and all of this. Mac developers, they were kind of a small little cliquey group, and they were more on the UI aspect. They were doing some other things. They're still in the C world, and you'll see that Objective-C is just basically a layer built on top of C. And so the thing about this is that you just have to realize you're going to see a lot of different paradigms, a lot of things. There's not going to be a direct mapping between something that you know in the .NET or Java world. It's just you do it this way. This is the convention. It's like joining some tribe in the middle of the South American rainforest, and they've just been doing things a different way, and that's kind of how it is. Resource constraints. This is a big deal with iPhone development. Apple really hammers that this is a big deal, and they have some restrictions that will kill your app, or it won't go to the App Store if you don't obey some of these constraints, which are memory. You have to be cognizant of memory, especially until iOS 5 is actually going to have some auto-releasing of memory, but in iOS 4 and below, you have to alloc and release your own memory for a lot of objects. Processing power, it's a mobile phone, it's super powerful, but there is limits. Battery life, this is another thing. Apple really does not want you to drain the battery life with your app because that's a selling point for them. Time. This is another one too, big one. Your applications have to respond quickly. It's a phone. Part of the whole thing about the iPhone is that it's fast. So you really have to be careful around that. And then finally, the limited library support. You have to remember with iPhone development, you don't have all of these libraries that are out here in the .NET and Java world. iPhone development has only been around since 2008, 2009, when the third-party SDK came out. So there's not a huge amount of libraries. There's some Cocoa, which is the Mac framework libraries that are out there, and there are stuff out there, but it's not nearly as wide of a variety of things as are in the .NET ecosystem or Java. So I wanted to harp a little bit more on this whole idea that it's an Apple world, because I think this is one of the biggest considerations that you have to really take in when you're becoming an iOS developer and you're developing for the iPhone. And Apple's going to control certain things about your app, the UI design guidelines. If you go too far from that, you may not get your app in the App Store. The customization is discouraged. They've kind of done that in the platform, whereas Android is real easy to skin controls and whatnot. In iOS, it's not so. Apple really wants you to use their controls that they've built and give a consistent user experience, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it makes things easier for developing an app because you don't feel this pressure of customizing. And there are certain customization points. I don't want you to think that it's not possible. And then, the App Store approval process. This is a big thing to remember. You can't just create any app that you want if you want to be able to sell it and monetize it. So Apple's going to be in control, and you kind of have to work with that mindset when you're developing an iPhone app.